Good morning and welcome to the fifth meeting of the Joint Interim Standing Committee on Commerce and Labor. Secretary, will you please take roll?
Senator Flores, Senator Pazina,
Present.
Senator Steinbeck,
Here.
Assemblymember Kasama, Assemblymember Miller, Assemblymember O'Neill, Assemblymember Roth, Chair Marzola.
I am here. Please mark Senator Flores, Assemblymember Kasama, and Assemblymember Roth absent excused. Welcome everyone that is here with us in Las Vegas, anyone in Carson City, and those tuning in over the internet. Before we get started, I do have a few housekeeping announcements. Members of the public may provide testimony in various ways, all of which are listed on the agenda. Committee information is available on Nellis, which can be accessed through the legislature's website. We ask that public comment be kept to 2 minutes so that everyone can be accommodated. Please remember that public comment may also be submitted in writing. Please also turn off all of your electronic devices, especially your cell phones. With that, we will start with public comment. Is there anyone here in Las Vegas wishing to provide public comment? Good morning. I'm sure you already know this, but please remember to state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes. You may begin when you're ready.
Hello. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. My name is Bridget Scheiner, spelled Bridgetscheiner. Stage name is Virginix. I'm a performer and entertainer and here today as an advocate of the Workplace Psychological Safety Act. Over the last 5 months, I've testified my own story of workplace abuse, neglect, intent to harm, and psychological bullying by a previous employer that led to blacklisting and a lifelong physical injury. The provided HR's failure to take action in my own workplace led to 9 others enduring nearly identical scenarios at the same workplace. I have since learned of waiters, bottle servers, bellhops, construction workers, and many more who have endured similar scenarios of retaliation and harassment by management on the job, that when reported to a higher up or a system in place like HR, nothing was done to take action, which later led to preventable physical and psychological harm. This has been reported to be an issue in Vegas, Reno, Mesquite, Pahrump, as well as Douglas County. Even in the most protected union worker workplace environments, many in the state have voiced how this bill would have better protected them from retaliation and harm on the workplace in ways that a union can only assist after the harm has already taken place. Nevada currently has one of the highest suicide and unemployment rates, and while this is not the sole contributor, this is definitely a contributor. While the Nevada Fair Employment Practices Act protects some workers in the state, it often leaves workers out of protections or it is not strictly upheld. I'm asking today the Labor Committee to sponsor the Workplace Psychological Safety Act to better protect its workers in Nevada. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for being with us today. Is there anyone else in Las Vegas wishing to provide public comment? I don't see any. Is there anyone in Carson City wishing to provide public comment? Don't see anyone walking up. Broadcast, is there anyone on the line?
Thank you, Chair. If you would like to participate in public comment today, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue.
Good morning, Chair Marzola and members of the committee. My name is Ben Innes. That is Beniness. I'm the coalition manager for the Nevada Housing Justice Alliance, statewide coalition of grassroots organizers and community advocates that stand with tenants in addressing the root causes of our state's housing crisis. We stand firmly in support of Mr. Norman's upcoming presentation on the tenant protections that Nevadans have desperately needed for years in order to stay stably housed and live with dignity, whether it's through stronger habitability enforcement, record sealing, or fixing our uniquely broken eviction process. And this is the housing agenda that Nevadans really need. The need for these protections, however, is often a symptom of landlords' unfettered ability to raise rents without limit. Without rent stability measures, more and more Nevadans will walk the very narrow tightrope of staying housed, cutting out essentials, and facing eviction or displacement. And we look forward to working with this body on the matter, this interim, and in the upcoming session. Lastly, I would like to invite all of you to eviction court watching that we are hosting at the Las Vegas Justice Court on Tuesday, July 21st, so we may all see the impacts of unchecked corporate greed firsthand. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Donna Wiegert, DonnaWegert. I originated and starred as the lead performer of the Awakening show at Wynn Las Vegas since its inception, April 2022, until my termination, July 2025. During my 3 years there, I witnessed secondhand, as well as personally experienced, repeated targeted psychological abuse from members of the production, creative, and managerial staff. I witnessed performers who first attempted simple civil conversation to address microaggressive behaviors or express safety concerns, ignored, dismissed, and later retaliated against through continued harassment, intimidation, disciplinary action, and at times even termination. Even when circumstances escalated to HR, more often than not, these disputes would be handed right back to the departments causing the aggression. The systems that are currently in place leave abusers unchecked in their positions and, more importantly, leave employees vulnerable to such abuse. I truly hope you consider the Workplace Psychological Safety Act, as it only serves as an additional resource to provide and support better, safer working conditions. Thank you so much.
There are no further callers to provide public comment at this time.
Thank you. Please remember, we will have another public comment period at the end of our meeting today. We will move to our next agenda item. It's a presentation from the Division of Insurance, Department of Business and Industry. Is there anyone here? Is Commissioner? Oh, hi, Commissioner.
Good morning, Chair. Excuse me. Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. Thank you for having me. For the record, my name is Ned Gaines, Nedgaines, and I'm the Commissioner of Insurance with the Nevada Division of Insurance. And I do have a presentation that I'll go through this morning, then I'll be happy to take any questions afterwards. We have the... this one right there. Okay. All right, thank you. So today I'm going to do an overview of the property in, property insurance market in Nevada with a focus on the wildfire risk. So based off of a data call that the division did in 2024, these are the most recent numbers that we have. We are in the process of gathering information. Every year, insurers are required to file what's called a market conduct annual statement, and it will give us the number of cancellations and non-renewals. Excuse me. Unfortunately, we won't have any specific information for wildfire non-renewals or cancellation through the market conduct annual statement. That's not information that report gathers, but we will get an overall idea of what we're looking at in terms of total cancellations, non-renewals, and then we can go back and individual carriers ask follow-up questions. We are anticipating doing another data call for 2027 so that we can get more specific information and see if there has been any change in the number of overall cancellations and non-renewals due to wildfire. I do want to stress that while the percentages look pretty alarming there, and there was a pretty large increase in 2024 in non-renewals that were related to wildfire risk, overall, we still have a relatively low number of non-renewals taking place or cancellations as well. As you can see, in 2024, the total policies in effect at the end of the year were a little over 1 million. Total policies canceled or non-renewed for any reason was 149,000. and that percentage was 14%. Of those, 2,703 were non-renewed or canceled due to wildfire risk. That is 0.3%. So as you can see, it's still a very low percentage of homes that are being non-renewed or canceled due to the wildfire. However, the number is increasing, so it is something that we definitely need to stay on top of. In 2024, the majority of those wildfire-related non-renewals were from Farmers and Allstate. Both of those companies were looking at their overall risk in the state, and they did non-renew quite a few. However, after discussions with the division, they did do non-renewal and cancellation on fewer homes than they originally intended to. And we'll get into more specifics here shortly about where those non-renewals and cancellations took place. So 18 companies, or 21% of the total, reported cancellations and non-renewals due to wildfire risk in 2024. And this next slide is showing where, by county, the majority of those non-renewals and cancellations happened. As you can see, Washoe County was the most impacted, which is not surprising given Incline Village is located in Washoe County. And Incline Village is one of the highest risk wildfire areas within the state. It's on Lake Tahoe. It is heavily forested. Also, there are pretty much there's only one way in, one way out. So there are concerns with evacuation, things of that nature. Clark County, surprisingly, was the second highest. That is one we are still somewhat confused on. We do know that Mount Charleston has some risk there, and there were a number of cancellations and non-renewals that took place. However, we have heard anecdotally from consumers and the fire chiefs and other stakeholders that even people within the city limits of Las Vegas, the Paradise area, that they are being non-renewed for wildfire. That is very confusing to us because overall, while the risk is not zero, it is much lower within the city limits than it would be in, say, the Mount Charleston area. Third is Douglas County. Again, there's a good portion of Douglas County on Lake Tahoe, so you have the heavily forested areas. Elko County comes in as fourth, and Carson City comes in fifth. Those are not surprising. Again, Elko has some areas that are heavily forested. Carson City, same thing, because it does extend up to the lake. There are a lot of homes that are built up as you're going up the mountains. And then Lyon County comes in sixth, and Humboldt comes in seventh. As you can see, it goes down dramatically from there. So it is the issue is concentrated primarily within 7 key counties. Those happen to be the counties that do have more forested areas than other parts of the state. And so this next slide was just showing the percentages. I won't go into deep dive on this one. But again, you can easily see where those non-renewals are taking place. This is pretty data-heavy presentation, so again, I'll do kind of a high-level overview, but it does get somewhat repetitive here. It's just showing the information in a different format. So if we look at it, percentage of cancellation and non-renewals by county, then Carson City pops to the top. Primarily is due to the lower policy count in Carson City. So it just puts numbers of this in a little bit different format. All right, as we get into the zip codes, though, it goes back to what we were showing on that first slide, with Washoe County being heavily impacted. Incline Village is the most impacted zip code. The policies in effect at the end of 2024 were 6,180. There were a total of 370 policies that were non-renewed due to wildfire risk, which came to a total percentage of 13.69. That does look like a high number, but again, it's based off of the total overall policies in force versus what was non-renewed. However, that is concerning. You know, it's a relatively high number. Anytime you start getting into double digits, it's something that we need to look at. We do know why, in some cases, the policies up there are getting non-renewed. Again, it's probably the highest risk of wildfire within the state in terms of the capability of there being a catastrophic wildfire. There's wildfires that happen all over the state every day. There was just one up in the Sparks area that the firefighters have been fighting. A lot of the fires that do occur, they're out in the wildlands and they don't really impact residential areas. However, insurers are looking at total risk, and if you look at just the capability of a fire coming in and causing catastrophic damage, taking out a large number of homes, Incline Village is most likely, and based on the vegetation and everything in that area, is the highest. However, there's been a lot of mitigation efforts up there, and that is something that the insurers need to take into account. As you can see, Reno, certain zip codes of Reno, those are primarily the zip codes 89511, that's going up Mount Rose Highway, 89506, that is predominantly the North Valleys. That is one where at the division we are doing some more work on because it is somewhat confusing as to why so many non-renewals are happening in that area. That area is primarily sagebrush, and while it does not equate zero risk, it is a lower risk than if you are in a pine forest. So we are doing a deeper dive into what's going on in that area to try to figure out, why that is one of the higher zip codes having the non-renewals and the cancellations. And then 89523, 89521, those are some of the areas on the outer edges of Reno. Again, they do start going into some of the more forested areas, particularly the Virginia Highlands. Washoe Valley is on here. As you can see, Washoe Valley had one of the highest percentages of non-renewals and cancellations. Washoe Valley is one of the higher risk areas. One of the largest fires in Nevada historically occurred in Washoe Valley. There was 37 structures that were destroyed in that fire. That actually was the largest wildfire in terms of loss of structures in Nevada's history. And then we get into Elko, State Line, and Carson City. So these zip codes account for 60% of the wildfire-related policy decisions. Again, we get just a different format showing it from policy count. It's pretty much the same information. And again, you look at Carson City and you look at this zip code, a 6,800% change over a 3-year period. Non-renewals were really, really low in 2022. They went up slightly in 2023, but then really ballooned in 2024. As we get that data coming in from the Market Conduct Annual Statement, that information was just submitted at the end of May by the insurer, so we are still going through all of that data so that we can get some good numbers. But it is concerning as to what happened that caused the spike in the numbers. And we have reason to believe that is continuing. In 2025, the numbers will be similar, if not a little bit higher. Okay, and again, showing zip codes, on a percentage basis. And then these are our zip codes with 1% adverse wildfire policy decisions in 2024. And you know, it plays out pretty much the same as all of it. So we're looking at pretty much the same data over and over here. Now, this is where we get into declinations. These are different than the non-renewals or the cancellations. So this was information that we requested specifically through this data call. This is not the kind of data that we normally get on a regular basis. It's not required to be reported annually by the carriers. Again, we're looking at doing another data call for 2027 so that we can get 2026 information, and this will be another one of those questions that we look at. But the declination, that's when somebody goes in and they apply for a policy and an insurer declines the policy. And there has been a steep increase in the number of declinations over the last 3 years. So as you can see, in 2022, overall, a little over 2,400 were declined due to the wildfire risk. In 2023, that went up to right around 5,000. But then in 2024, it ballooned and it went to over 13,000. And while, excuse me, 18 companies reported application denials due to wildfire risk in 2022, compared to 22 companies in 2024, which was a plus 22%. This is still a minority of the market. However, you know, anytime somebody can't get insurance, it's something we're concerned about. We want everybody to be able to get insurance. Now, there's obviously going to be some reasons that certain insurers may not take on certain risk, but insurance needs to be readily available for everyone. So anytime we see an increase like this, it's something that we need to look into. And again, the counties where we're seeing the declines pretty much mirrors the counties where we saw the cancellations and the non-renewals. You know, Washoe County, Clark County, Elko, Douglas, Lyon, Carson City, and Humboldt. Nye County and White Pine County, they also saw an elevated declination rate. Now, and this was being self-reported by the carriers on the data call that they declined it specifically due to the wildfire risk. And, you know, one thing we will say, smaller, less populous counties tend to have higher percentages of wildfire-related application declinations, and that's due just to the small number of policies that are enforced, so any amount of declinations is going to come up at a higher percentage rate. Okay. And then we get into the zip code information. 89506 was one of the highest. Again, that's an area where we are doing a deeper dive into what's driving that, because relative to some other areas, that area should be at a lower risk, just simply because of the vegetation makeup and the fact that most of the communities that are in 89506 are new communities. There has been mitigation that was done when the communities were being built. Almost every home up there is stucco. Also, a lot of the landscaping, you know, you have the xeriscape, you have a lot of rocks, you have a lot of breaks in between neighborhoods to help keep wildfire, if it does come through, from jumping from one neighborhood to another. So there's definitely something going on there that we're either not seeing or there's some information that is incorrect, and I will actually go into that shortly. So changes in overall application declinations. One zip code per rump jumps out. They had 1 declination due to wildfire in 2022, 0 in 2023, but then in 2024 that jumped to 129. That is another area where we are somewhat confused by. It is more rural, so there are there's sagebrush, things of that nature out there, but no, that's a very large increase. Las Vegas specifically, 89166, which is Northwest Providence Sky Canyon. That is another one we are somewhat confused by. Henderson, this is where things start getting a little quirky, and so we are having to do some additional research into what's driving that. And then again, the codes with the greatest application denials due to wildfire risk. Ely, Spring Creek, Verdi, State Line, Wellington. So if you're looking at just percentage points, it does change up the information slightly. And then I won't bore you going through each of the maps. And you can easily see these were the applications declined, and it does show. As you can see, we were speaking of the outer regions of the Reno area is where we're seeing the declinations concentrated. Just getting into the Lake Tahoe area. And then Winnemucca, Battle Mountain, and Elko. And then the Las Vegas, Pahrump, and Mesquite. As you can see, majority of it here in the Clark County area is on the outskirts of Vegas. However, Henderson is included in there, and that one is a little bit curious as well. And then these are just showing the complaint volume that we've received from January 2022 to March 2026. And these are complaints that were related to declinations or cancellations. You can see we spiked in 2024. In July, we received 68 complaints related to this issue. That did start dropping off. We spiked again last year with 63, and then fell off again. As insurance, especially homeowners, it is renewed on an annual basis, and people do buy homes in a cyclical manner. They're buying at certain seasons. More homes are purchased, so that's when more people are going to have an issue getting insurance. So that doesn't surprise me that it drops off during certain months and then it rises again. So in 2022, we received 328 complaints regarding home insurance. That went up to 444 in 2023, 595 in 2024, and then we did start dropping off again for 2025 with 560. However, most of the consumer complaints are about water damage and roof damage, not wildfire risk. I do believe the 2025 numbers are actually would have been on par with 2024, if maybe even a little higher, but due to the cyber attack last year and our systems were down for a period of time, we were unable to take complaints, so that dropped the number off. But we picked it up a little bit at the beginning of 2026. They were just delayed. So these are just showing the market statistics for home insurance in 2024. Total written premium was a little over $1 billion. Earned premium was $982 million. In total direct incurred losses, $595 million. That gave the industry overall a 60.59% loss ratio, which is an excellent loss ratio. So the insurance industry is making money in Nevada. The loss adjustment expenses were 8%, general expenses 4.4%, selling expenses 17.3%, and then your 3.6 for your premium taxes, licensing, and fees. And then of the carriers that do issue dividends, not all carriers do, that was 0.3%. On average, the underwriting profit was 5.9%, which is pretty standard across the country. That is what gets built in for profit. But the overall return on net worth was around 14%. Do want to stress, though, because there's a big difference between that 5.9 and the 14%. That 14% includes their investment income. Also, if they have property that they sold, all of that gets factored into their overall profit. Profit is not built entirely off of insurance premiums that they receive from issuing policies. So for home insurance in 2024, the overall rate adjustment that happened based off of the rate filings that came into the Division of Insurance was 7.79%. Now that is what we approved. And I will say that's not what gets filed by the companies. Companies typically file much higher rate increases, and then our actuarial staff, they do a complete review of what is submitted by the insurers, and then there's a lot of back and forth to get them to justify the numbers that they've submitted. If they cannot justify it, then we will push them to lower the rate increase. So 7.79 overall is a pretty good number compared to some of the other markets in the country. So in 2025, that number did go up slightly. It went up to 12.31. And so you can see, you probably can't see it on the screen, but I'm sure when you have a copy, it does break this out overall by each carrier. And then so far for 2026, from January through mid-April, it has been a 0.96% increase. So we've been able to keep the increases down. Allstate, as you can see here on the far left, they actually had a 1.51 decrease. While not huge, we're happy with any time the insurance company files for a decrease in rates. Overall, the market is healthy. We do have around 80 to 86 carriers that are writing homeowners insurance in Nevada. There are some that have tightened up their underwriting requirements. And that's where we come in at the division, also taking a look at potential policy changes that could be had. One of the things we stress at the division is mitigation. That's one way for individual homeowners to protect their property against wildfire risk. They need to harden their home as best they can. There are some things, not everybody has the ability to completely revamp and do full mitigation efforts, but even small changes can make a difference. Keeping a defensible space around the home, being very strategic in the types of foliage that they put on their property, putting less combustible plant types, trying to stay away from the conifers. Those are highly combustible, so if you have a fire, they're going to catch on fire and they're going to burn for a while. Closing your eaves if you can, making sure that you have a fire screen on any of your vents that go into your attic space. You don't want embers to be able to get in there. So there are a lot of easy ways for homeowners to do some mitigation to lower their risk. That is one thing. There are several companies that do offer mitigation discounts. Right now, that is voluntary, though. There is no requirement that a insurer offer a mitigation discount. That is something, that could be on the table from a policy perspective to help with the overall cost of insurance. That if a homeowner does what they need to do to try to protect their property, they should have an incentive and should be rewarded for it. But right now, it is strictly voluntary. So one thing I do want to point out, as I was saying, we don't just blanket stamp filings when they come in and automatically give insurers what they are looking for. From 2024, 2025, and through April 22nd of 2026, our actuarial review has resulted in a savings to Nevada consumers of over $70 million. Again, when they come in, they may request like a 30 or 40% rate increase. However, after everything is said and done and the review of the filing is complete and the justification that they have, it may result only in a 5 to say 10% increase overall. Well, that's money that is a direct savings to Nevada consumers. And that concludes the presentation. I am happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Commissioner, for your presentation. I don't see you. Can you maybe turn off your PowerPoint? There we go. Thank you. We will start with Vice Chair.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you so much, Commissioner, for the presentation. I really enjoyed it. I had a question on slide 16. You mentioned maybe looking into what was driving the declinations in Henderson specifically when it came to wildfire risk. And I was curious with the 89011 and 89012 zip codes, if you had found anything when looking into it, or if this is something you're still looking into. And also, this is 2022 to 2024 data, if you had anything from 25 which showed maybe a change.
No, thank you for the question. For the record, Ned Gaines, Commissioner of Insurance. No, that's a great question, and that is something we have looked into it. We have a good idea of what is driving it. Insurers use companies that do catastrophe modeling, and part of that, these companies will do modeling for wildfire. They do it for hurricanes, earthquake, any number of what's classified as a catastrophe. So, flood, major losses. And in looking at it, they provide maps that show the overall risk a certain area has for wildfire. What we are finding in some of these zip codes is that they're rating them as very high wildfire risk, which doesn't seem to match the conditions on the ground. These models are filed with our office. We do review them. However, there are portions of the algorithms and the data points that go into the models in their creation that they are allowed to hold that as confidential. So we don't get a full picture of what is making up the model. But where we started seeing these increases in the declinations, the cancellations, non-renewals in certain areas that didn't make a whole lot of sense, is it appears that with the recent wildfires that have taken place in California, we're getting lumped in with them. And they're taking this approach that essentially the entirety of the western states have the same type of risk, same vegetation makeup, same topography, which, as we all know, is not true. Nevada is very, very different from California. Nevada also takes a very different approach when it comes to fighting wildfires. There are prescribed burns on a regular basis to keep some of the vegetation down. If a fire breaks out, even if it breaks out in the wildlands, the fire chiefs do a very good job of going out and getting that fire put out as quickly as possible. They don't just sit and let it burn. California historically has done that, so their risk is much higher. However, what we're seeing is that we're getting lumped in with them, which is driving some of this inaccurate information in certain areas. I've had conversations with my counterparts in some of the other Western states, and they are seeing the same thing. So that tells me that we are onto something. As we're gathering more data, that is going to be a conversation that we have with the modelers. We want to pull them in and sit them down and have them explain where this information is coming from. As far as 2025 data, I don't have any specifics just yet. Based off of the information that based on complaints and the data we do have, which is limited, does not appear that the Henderson area is seeing quite as many non-renewals or cancellations. Where we're seeing the bigger impact right now is the Reno area, also Elko.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Chair, for allowing me an additional question. I'd be very curious once you pull in the modelers to see, I'd be very curious once the 2025 data is out to see where that lands, just because looking at where it is right now, the 89012 zip code has an 8,200% 3-year increase, and 89011 a 7,900% 3-year increase. So it's really quite high. So I'd love to see where 2025 is, and if those models have maybe changed based on actual conditions on the ground. And if not, I'd love to hear if you could follow up with the committee about those conversations with the modelers and if any changes are being made, so that we're not penalizing Nevada residents for conditions that are happening in California or in other parts of the state. Thank you.
Senator Steinbeck.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation as well. I have a couple comments here and then the question, but I know you talked about Mount Charleston possibly being one of the higher risks here in Clark County, which I certainly would agree with, but even during the Carpenter 1 fire, we had 23,000 acres and we lost no residents, right? We lost 6 buildings. They were all outbuildings. And no residents there at all. And then hearing the concerns, and I've heard that as well about people getting canceled here in the urban area. We don't lose homes here in the urban Las Vegas area due to wildfires. We don't ever lose homes due to wildfires, like a real classic wildfire. What we do lose a home to sometimes is like a fireworks hits a tree, burns from there and burns in, and then gets the house or something along those lines. But we don't have house to house fires here in the urban area. And it's very concerning that these areas are being subject to these types of increases. But my question is, when you're talking about cancellations, is that or non-renewals, is that always the insurance company non-renewing, or is that sometimes also like the rate being so high that the customer decides not to renew? And then are they finding other companies to cover them? And do we have a idea of if they're paying exorbitant fees after that or increases in the expenses?
Thank you for the question. For the record, Ned Gaines, Commissioner of Insurance. So if the consumer, the policyholder, takes the action, that's not something that's tracked as a cancellation or a non-renewal. These are the numbers that we have, that is specific action taken by the company. So it's what we're showing here is the company has made a decision. It could be they did an inspection of the property, and it was determined that conditions on the ground, they may have found a number of items that, you know, maybe the yard wasn't kept up, or they had a bunch of firewood sitting next to the home, things of that nature. That could drive it, or what we're seeing more often, it seems to be that they're taking a look at this model, the model saying this particular area has a very high wildfire risk. They're making the determination, we don't want to write in that area anymore, and they do the non-renewal. The cancellations are a little bit different, so I do want to explain the difference between a cancellation and a non-renewal. So a non-renewal is when you've reached the end of your policy. Homeowners policies are issued on an annual basis. So you've reached the end of your year of your policy term, and the insurer has determined they don't want to renew that policy for another year. So that's when they do a non-renewal. And there are certain guidelines that have to be followed when they do the non-renewal. Have to provide at least 30 days notice to the insured, so that gives them time to go and look for additional coverage. A cancellation is when the policy is in force, in mid-term, the company cancels it. Now, companies are only allowed to do a cancellation of a homeowner's policy within the first 90 days after the policy is in force. That is an area that I'm starting to receive feedback from various stakeholders that appears to be an issue. Is that when an insurance company is issuing the policy, they're accepting payment, but they have not done any type of inspection on the property to determine if it meets their underwriting guidelines. And then they wait until second or third month in to do that inspection. Then they're saying, your property does not meet our underwriting guidelines. We're going to cancel you within our right of canceling within 90 days. Problem with that is, well, twofold. They really should be doing the inspection on the front end, because once somebody pays a couple of months into their policy, they expect that policy is in force. It also goes against the whole idea of the statute that allows that cancellation within 90 days. The spirit of that law was to allow companies to be able to cancel a policy that they found out that there was something some kind of serious violation that changed the risk completely from what they initially thought it was. So it would be, an example, somebody purchases a policy and then they find out that there's a huge sinkhole in the backyard or something. That significantly changes the risk. That was the whole point of that law. However, they're using it in a way that they're not doing that inspection on the front end. They're doing it much further into the policy period. That is something I am working on right now, issuing a bulletin to remind companies that they need to do their inspections as soon as possible, preferably before they write the policy. Once the application comes in, they should be doing that inspection. Definitely need to be doing the inspection within 30 days. And they need to advise the consumer on the front end that there's a possibility that if they find something significant, it could cause the policy to be canceled. The way they're acting right now, it runs afoul of the unfair trade practices. So we'll be doing a reminder through the bulletin to let companies know that we're not going to allow this type of action. And then from there, if we find out companies are still doing it, under my authority, we could take enforcement action against them. Did that answer your question completely? I know I got a little sidetracked there.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One part of the question that maybe you answered, but I didn't get was if the homeowners are able to find other insurance following the cancellation, and if we have an idea if they're being exorbitant fees from that.
There
increases.
are some people are experiencing, they're having to shop more than they have in the past. There are carriers who will write. We don't have any areas that are completely devoid of being able to purchase coverage. Now, sometimes that does mean the price is going to be higher. Overall, I do want to put it in context, and what's expensive, that varies from person to person. Everybody's definition of expenses is different. Overall, when you compare Nevada to our neighbors and other states within the country, we are on the lower end of premium for homeowners. Now, that has gone up over the last few years. And that ties into if these companies are using a model that is not 100% accurate, and even if they're willing to write the policy, they're basing it on something that's not true, so then they charge the higher rate. So that's why it is so important for us to get behind these models, have these conversations and find out what's going on. But right now, to answer your question, there are no areas that are completely devoid of options. In some areas, they are limited, but there are options.
Can I have one more? Thank you so much, Madam Chair. One other thing I wanted to clarify, you said that mitigations are not taken into account many times, but then you also said that on-site inspections occur, which I would think would take a look at the overall risk, which would include mitigation. So I want to give you a chance to kind of explain that. And then also, could you tell us, are there states that currently require mitigations to be part of the premium process or the renewal process?
Right. The inspection, they would notice any mitigation that had taken place, but under current law, they are not required to take that into account when calculating the premium. It is entirely voluntary. Of the companies that have filed for mitigation discounts, there's only a few. So that's how we know most carriers are not doing it, because to provide a discount, that has to be part of their rate filing. Right now, I know of only 10 insurers that offer any sort of mitigation discount. So, well, yes, they would notice it when they go to do the inspection. The inspection is more for underwriting to decide whether or not they are willing to take on the risk. So having done that mitigation may help them take the risk on, but it still does nothing in terms of getting them a discount for it.
Thank you. And are other states requiring that?
No other state that I'm aware of requires that they take mitigation into consideration.
Thank you. Thank you for the extra time, Madam Chair.
Any other questions? Assemblyman O'Neill.
Thank you, Chair. I may actually have a couple questions, Chair, depending how we go. I appreciate it. Commissioner, you made a statement about how Nevada is getting lumped in with California, particularly on determination of wildland fire risk. Did I understand that correctly?
That is our belief, based off of what we are seeing with some of these models that are being used by the carriers. We are making some assumptions, and that's why we are working on it. It is a high priority for the division to get into the meat of it and figure out what's going on. It's really one of the things that we can account for in that. Why certain areas that anybody can look at it and tell that the overall risk of wildfire would be low. And it's being calculated by the insurance company as extreme wildfire risk. And this turnabout, and again, as I said earlier, I've had conversations with my counterparts in some of our neighboring states, and they're seeing the same type of thing. Also, I won't name a name, but one of the reasons we believe this is we were actually contacted by one of the companies doing modeling and talked to our lead actuary, and they were asking very specific information about the vegetation makeup of a good portion of our state. Well, my first thought was, why are you asking us for that? Don't you already have it? And if they don't already have it, then what are they basing their decision on that these areas are high wildfire risk?
If I may. So I guess this is two parts. Those other state or those insurance carriers, though, aren't using Nevada to help supplant or make up for their losses in the states. These combined, when they're combining things, they're not allowed to do that, correct? They have to base their rates on actions in Nevada.
It's supposed to be based
solely
entirely on the risk on the ground in Nevada. And based on their experience in Nevada. But that's the thing, their experience here on the homeowners market is good because of the historically low risk of wildfire and the low number of properties lost within the last 30 years. We don't even total, over the last 30 years, we have not lost the same number of homes as what a single wildfire in California has caused a loss of. So we're very low risk and have been historically. So that's why some of these things don't add up and they don't make sense.
And I guess that's where I'm confused. When you're telling me that they have to base their rates on what occurs in Nevada, solely in Nevada, but yet there's indications that they're lumping us in with other states, say primarily California. Have you asked them? I mean, we've got to take a stronger action than saying we're thinking about doing something.
No, we are in conversations with them, yes, to get them to give us more detail on how they are coming up with these scenarios and, coming up with their calculations. It is an ongoing conversation.
I appreciate that. If I may, Chair, is some of that they're using drones instead of personal inspections of locations, is my understanding, what's been told to me. Is that correct?
That is what we are hearing as well, is that a lot of these inspections, they are using drones. And in some cases, drones don't pick up accurate information. It will register something that in pictures looks like something that is not.
And I guess that's what's upsetting me with the whole thing we keep talking about. We're asking, we're looking at things. As you said earlier, the percentages are fairly low, but let that be your home that has just been canceled and you've got to find somebody, another carrier within 30 days. The ramifications of not carrying or having fire insurance to your mortgage is severe. And so we have passed in last session the statute allowing attempts to do exploratory, or as we said, the sandbox. And it's my understanding that really none of the insurance carriers are interested in looking at ways to reduce rates and to try some of these new efforts. Is that a fair statement of what's been told to me? Is that fair?
that is a fair statement. No insurer has come to be part of the sandbox. Now, flip side, no carrier has excluded wildfire either from their homeowners, but they're not being very innovative because they're not coming to the table with any new ideas either.
Maybe we should take that in consideration when they come in and ask for rate increases then. That's it for me, Chair. Thank you very much.
Assemblymember Miller.
Thank you, Chair. Following the line of discussion from my colleagues, I also share some concerns. You know, we hear frequently, especially in Northern Nevada, from Nevadans who the non-renewals, not able to get coverage, denial of claims, and of course the rate increases. And yet during your presentation, you did share the profit that these companies are making. Yet we know that we have Nevadans losing their homes and losing everything due to this. And I don't see, what wasn't shared in there was the average claim payout or support for Nevadans who have been paying their insurance. There was also something that was mentioned that was highly concerning to me too, is when you were discussing the high risk assessments and that those were confidential. And I'm not sure how that would bypass, most banking and financial regulations, that these standards or assessments are confidential, especially from your agency, which I believe is to protect the consumer and not the company. So as you've heard from my colleagues about what can we do for enforcement and actual action to make sure that we're protecting our people, can you talk about, and you even said that you would take enforcement action. Enforcement action to us is, to be quite honest, is not a bulletin. That's just a reminder of what the standards and expectations and laws say. So what are some of these enforcement actions? And as you're saying that the companies have not voluntarily come to the table. So can you share maybe some enforcement action you've already taken or that you plan to take or have the ability to take? Because at the end of the day, we want our Nevadans protected.
No, thank you for the question. For the record, Ned Gaines, Commissioner of Insurance. And the enforcement actions, what statutorily I am allowed to do is the enforcement of fines. That varies depending on what the violation is. And that does increase as if they have more violations of the same type, that can increase. In regards to the situation that I was discussing, we have not taken any enforcement action yet because this was a new issue that was brought to us. So we are, again, issuing the bulletin to advise carriers of what they need to do so that then we have the grounds, we can start tracking it and figuring out, are companies continuing to do that? Those statutorily, that's what I'm allowed to do. When it comes to the confidentiality of certain aspects of the models, that is in statute. That they are allowed to keep certain aspects of their modeling and keep that as confidential, and they do not have to release it.
Thank you for that response. So with that, I just want to be clear. You have not at this point enacted any fines on anyone?
Not at this point, not for the issue that I was discussing related to doing the inspection early on. Because again, I don't have hard evidence of any carrier doing it. These are all anecdotal. However, I'm hearing it from enough sources that tells me there is something going on. So I need to do something, but I need to be able to gather that information to know exactly who's doing it as well. Because right now I don't have any specific names of carriers.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Chair.
Any additional questions? I have a couple. Okay, so let's start with, since we were just talking about the inspection within 90 days, and I understand that, you send out a bulletin and reminders and you're asking, these companies to do what they should be doing, and not everyone is doing it. So my question is, what if we changed the law from 90 days to 30? Do you think that that would help our folks, which are the most important, because what I don't want is for Nevadans to keep paying their premium for 60 days and then the 90 days hit, they do the inspection and bam, they're canceled, right? I don't think that's right. And so is changing it to 30 days, if we do it through legislation, do you think that would help this cause?
Thank you for the question. For the record, Ned Gaines, Commissioner of Insurance. Yes, I do believe that that would, it would incentivize the insurers to do the inspection on the front end or as quickly as they possibly can following the issuance of the policy.
Perfect. Thank you. We will be doing that. Have we to date had any carriers leave our state? Because, we worked on some legislation last session that relates to this subject matter, and there was a lot of talk of how carriers were going to leave and Nevadans were going to be without insurance. Has that happened?
Thank you for the question. For the record, Ned Gaines, Commissioner of Insurance. I want to clarify here, so in the terms that we use within the insurance industry. So there is a withdrawal of an insurance company, and when that happens, the company gives up their certificate of authority to do business in our state. No carrier has done that, at least on the property casualty side. Then there is the next level is where they will discontinue a certain line of insurance. We have had some carriers that have discontinued their homeowners line of insurance. However, all of the carriers that have done so, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we've had 4 since December of last year. But every single one of them, they had a very, very small book of business. We're talking, 10 to 20 policies that were in force. So it was not an overall large impact. 3 of those carriers, though, they were pulling from one affiliate, and then they were rewriting those policies in another affiliated insurance company. So it wasn't even a full withdrawal of that line. They just shifted it over to a different company.
Thank you for your answer, just so I can understand. So they shifted, they did not leave.
Correct.
Thank you. And so my last question has to do with the lower risk areas. And you stated earlier that you were doing a deep dive. Can you talk to us about what that deep dive looks like and how long that's going to take before we have any answers?
Yes, thank you for the question. For the record, Ned Gaines, Commissioner of Insurance. Yes, part of the deep dive is I have my actuarial staff and some other key staff. We are having conversations with some other entities that do this type of modeling. They are not the major players that a lot of the insurance companies do business with, because we're interested in seeing what their data is producing. One publicly available source of data is with the state fire marshal. They have their own interactive map on their website, which produces very different results. So we're also, engaging with the state fire marshal. We're engaging with the fire chiefs in some of these lower risk areas to get an idea of, what is really going on the ground, so that we have, as we're talking with the major modelers, we have the data to back up to say, okay, this is what we have. It contradicts the information that you have. Please explain. It is going to be probably a several month process to go through this. It's a lot of data, and it's a lot of very complicated data, complicated mathematical equations that go into this. So it is not something that we can produce in a couple of weeks. We've started the work. I think we're in a good spot, and we will continue the work because, as I said earlier, this is a priority for the division. We want people to be able to get insurance. They have to have it. It can be devastating if you suffer a loss and you don't have coverage. Another item that we are doing, I am working with the National Association of Insurance Commissioners. They have an arm called the Center for Insurance Policy and Research. They are a bunch of data scientists. I just had a conversation with them last week. They are going to do a project for us here in Nevada on the homeowner side, where they are pulling information so that we can get an idea of how many people in the state are going uninsured on their homeowners and how many people are also underinsured, because that is another huge risk. Is you may have insurance, but you may not have enough insurance. That was in some of the large fires in California. That was the result. Many people, they had coverage, but they didn't have enough coverage to cover the actual replacement of their home. So we are looking at this from multiple angles.
And thank you for that answer. And I know it takes time, right? Data just takes time. And I know that the Division of Insurance usually comes in front of Commerce and Labor during regular sessions. So maybe we can have those answers by next February, and then you can come in and present to us. That would be incredible. Vice Chair.
Thank you so much, Chair, for allowing me one more question. I was curious, based on the huge increase in 2024 of declinations in regards to wildfire risk, if you had been speaking to surrounding states or working with NAIC to talk to other states to see if any of them also found the same thing happening there and how they were reacting to try to help their citizens.
Thank you for the question. For the record, Ned Gaines, Commissioner of Insurance. Yes, I'm in regular contact with my counterparts, and this is an issue that is impacting the entirety of the Western Zone. I'm actually, when I leave here this afternoon, I am heading to a wildfire conference, as I'll be meeting up with the commissioners from New Mexico and Utah. But in my conversations with them, they are also seeing an increase in the number of declinations, cancellations, and a lot of the similar issues that we're seeing here in Nevada as it relates to confusion over why in certain areas. So that is also lets me know that while it was an assumption at first that these models were not accurate, that just helps solidify it as well, that other states are feeling it. As a zone, the NAIC is divided into different zones than the Western state. We do have a lot of conversations around this, and we are currently working on a playbook so that all states that have very similar risk, we can gather together. One thing that we are looking at is at our next Western Zone meeting, we are looking to create a task force so that all the states in the Western Zone can join together to share the information that we're doing in terms of questioning the modelers. Coming together as a group, we're going to have a much larger voice and a much larger impact.
Thank you so much. I'd love to see some best practices come out of this so that we can figure out how to help Nevadans when it comes to just the massive increase of declinations. Thank you.
Senator Steinbeck.
Thank you once again, Madam Chair. When you go and you talk to the modelers, one piece of information that might be helpful that for us is to understand if they use local fire department reporting in their modeling. If they do, I could see where there might be one issue, and that is that a lot of the reporting software, it groups a small brush fire and wildfire all together. So your number of instances would seem much larger if you were to take a look at that data set as far as wildfires in these urban areas than actually is there. It might just be a cigarette butt started a small brush fire. It'll still be reported in that software as a wildfire. And so if you could clarify that, I think that might be something that's of value. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for that. I will take that back with me.
Any additional questions? I don't see any. I do have a quick question, not about the wildfire, but I know that last time you were here, we talked about auto insurance and zip codes. Do you have any information for us at this time?
Thank you for the question. For the record, Ned Gaines, Commissioner of Insurance. Yes, I do have some information. And I did share a report that was sent over to LCB. If any of you did not receive that and need it, let me know. I'll be happy to send that again. And we did find, in terms of the most expensive zip code within the state, that is falling to North Las Vegas. Based off of the data that we have, the drivers of that are showing that particular zip code, there are more car crashes or accidents that occur in that zip code than any other zip code within the state. Also, there is a very high number of thefts that take place within that zip code. Now, here's the bigger question, and which is going to require some more research, is why? We get the statistics, we get the numbers, but the causality of those numbers is not something that comes across in the report. So that is going to require some additional research on our end to figure out what is driving that.
And have you started that research? Because obviously the problem is, we have auto insurance rates in North Las Vegas, it being more expensive to where maybe, people aren't able to afford it. And so that's a problem. Have you started that study?
Yes, we are diving into that. We have reached out to Clark County. We're also reaching out to the North Las Vegas PD, the Department of Transportation, to start gathering some data to try to figure out what the drivers are behind that. We're also looking at, because another question that the last time I was here was regarding those people who drive at night. We're trying to get accident data over a 24-hour period. Because because someone drives at night, if the accidents are taking place during the day, then why are they having a rating factor that increases their rate for driving at night? Clark County is a 24/7 town, so that's something that we're, like I said, we are gathering that data so that we can try to come up with an answer for, again, the drivers for North Las Vegas, and to determine if those rating factors for night driving, if they're supported by when the accidents are happening.
Thank you. And do you think that maybe could be done by the time we start session?
Yes, we can have that. We'll have that information by session, definitely. If we can get it sooner, we will share.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Last chance. Any additional questions? I don't see any. Thank you so much, Commissioner, for being with us today and answering all of our questions. We do appreciate it.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members, for having me. It was a pleasure. Have a good day.
Our next presentation is the Nevada Coalition of Legal Services Providers. I believe our presenter is here, Mr. Norman. Welcome. Thank you for being with us today. You may begin when you're ready.
Chair, members of the committee, Jonathan Norman, Jonathan Norman. Can you see the PowerPoint? No, excellent. All right, awesome. I'm with the Nevada Coalition of Legal Service Providers. So primarily the largest legal service provider in the state is Legal Aid Center of Southern Nevada. We also include a senior law program, which is here in Clark County and also serves Nye County and is exploring options to get into other rural communities addressing senior issues. In addition, volunteer attorneys for rural Nevadans and Northern Nevada Legal Aid, which covers Washoe and some of the surrounding counties. We coordinate very closely with Nevada Legal Services, which is our statewide legal aid provider. Because of some federal funding streams, they're not allowed to lobby. So if, for example, you ever wanted expertise in the housing space on like vouchers, you would have to invite them to come and testify. And that's how they would be, and I'm happy to facilitate that. So thank you so much for having me today to go over tenant protections. I know you had a big housing day a few months ago and I wasn't able to make it, so I really appreciate the ability to be here today. So I'm going to cover, so that's who we are. And today we're just going to go over a few things, the current state of evictions in Nevada. Now, some of these chapters that these items exist in are going to be things that are going to be actually in the Judiciary Committee. Some of them are things like 118A, that lands squarely in commerce and labor. The reason they're important for both committees to understand is the interplay between the two. They're very linked. So in 118A, you have the rights of tenants and landlords when they contract, when they agree to create a lease. Some of those rights can only be enforced through Chapter 40, and that could be a tenant exercising the right to a habitable dwelling. That could be a landlord using the eviction process. So I'm going to touch on both of those in the presentation. And then we're going to go through some bills that were successful last session and some opportunities to learn from bills that weren't successful and maybe tweak them for the coming session. Taking into account the veto message and the changing, makeup of our state government potentially. And so the state of evictions, I think it's really important, and all this data comes from the Nevada Supreme Court's website. And so they publish an annual report and you can see the eviction numbers. And you can see 2020 and 2021, obviously we were during COVID, so we had a moratorium for much of those years. So you're going to see the eviction numbers very low. 2019 is a little bit of an anomaly. So it's hard to look at that and say, are we returning to that as a baseline? The reason it's an anomaly is they didn't tease out the data to show summary evictions. They just had real property. So it included things beyond just evictions. And so right now, what I think we can say is over the past 12 months, we're down 7%. I've seen projections that this year in 2026 will be down about 9% of our evictions in Southern Nevada and probably about 9% statewide. The reason I think that's a comfortable number for me to say is, about 80 to 85% of the evictions are going to be here in Clark County, with 75% just being Las Vegas Justice Court. So when you have that number of evictions being in this area and we're projecting the number dropping here, I think statewide we're going to see that number drop as well. And then so last session we had, and this is the second session in a row, we've had a significant appropriation for rental assistance. And this is something I think we can all be very proud of. In last session, it was championed by Danielle Monroe Moreno, and it appropriated $21 million to the three jurisdictions. So Clark County, the city of Reno to cover all of Washoe County, and then the Nevada Rural Housing Authority. The data points in this slide just show that this has been a program that's been stood up and working for some time. We do have some updated data on where we're at in the AB 475 appropriation. So for example, Clark County has served 577 households. So that's folks that have been diverted from eviction. How that court functions is somebody checks on their tenant answer that they're over the age of 62 or they have somebody in their household who gets their income from Social Security disability. So that routes it to diversion court. Legal Aid Center provides an attorney for those folks when they're responsive. And then the social services meets with them and starts talking about rental assistance, whether the housing is sustainable. So they've managed to reach 577 households, and they've approved $2.5 million in rental assistance for people who are in eviction. So these are people who, but for this bill, but for this money, are going to be evicted. And when you think about, these are all people on fixed income, so seniors and adults with disabilities, so very important. And then in the Rural Housing Authority, they have distributed $385,000 to date. And they have, it shows that in the rurals, it's everywhere from White Pine County. The majority are in Carson, so they've served 169 households. And I think it's 70% of those households are making less than $25,000 a year. So when we think about meeting the most vulnerable in our community, again, but for this rental assistance, we're talking 169 households that would have lost housing. So very important. And then the Reno and the Washoe, they have served, they've given out about $2.5 million. Some of that money goes through their version of an eviction diversion court, which is Judge Birchie and Reno Justice Court. I've spoken with her. The program is functioning very well. And I think a public commenter earlier invited folks to come watch eviction court here in Clark County. I know Judge Birchie would be happy to have folks come to her court to see how they're functioning and getting people diverted from evictions. And so in the city of Reno, they've served 179 folks through the Reno Justice Court, and then they've served 757 folks who are not in that justice court, so in Sparks and in unincorporated Washoe County. Clark County, an important thing to note about our program here, and the spend is a little bit lower, right? Some of those other programs are already about 50% of their money. We're at about $2.5 million out of $15 million. Initially, Clark County was only set up to run eviction diversion through Las Vegas Justice Court. So February 1st, we expanded to include North Las Vegas and Henderson. It takes a lot of coordination to have 3 court systems, legal aid, landlords in 3 jurisdictions, and social services all rowing in the same direction. So that went well. And then in July, they're expanding the population to include families with young children. And so right now we're setting that at families with kids under the age of one year old. The reason for that is we want to make sure that the money doesn't run out. And so if we find in 4 months that we're not spending as much money as we think, we'll be able to expand the age range up. So assist families with kids under the age of 4 or 5 or whatever the social service modeling shows. One thing for this bill is it does take a lot to stand up these programs and to get them working, whether that's Reno Justice Court, whether that's the Rural Housing Authority, or here in Clark County with social services. It does require ongoing support from the legislature. So this money, I think it has a spend date of September of 2027. I don't think all the jurisdictions are going to have money to that date. I think they're going to run out earlier. And then a bill that was passed last session, this is like the transparency bill. And one thing I think is important about this bill is it's very similar to a bill that was brought in 2023 and was not successful. And I think, the lessons to learn when bills aren't successful is you can tweak them. You can work more in depth with all the parties to get to some consensus and agreement. And I think it shows the importance of bringing legislation back when it's the right legislation and maybe it just didn't work in that session. And so if you remember, there was some pretty horrid reporting from at the FTC fining Invitation Homes for not being transparent in leases. And if anybody's seen a lease recently, we see a lot of them because people just email their leases to us and are like, can you look at this? 60 pages is not a long lease anymore for an apartment or for a house. Like that's with the addendums, that's getting pretty standard, 60 plus. And what the Invitation Homes case found is the landlord was burying fees throughout the lease. So you weren't sure what you were going to pay. And so AB 121 really fixed that. And it said you have to have, one number. You advertise it, you tell the tenant you have to have one number for rent. You can't have, we're going to have a garbage concierge service buried on page 40 of the lease. We're going to have a AC filter change buried on page 60. Not that you can't charge for those things, but you need to have it in one number in the lease so that people know what they're bargaining for. There were some other changes, and we're still fielding calls, and I think some of these things will be ironed out in just in the court and seeing how judges are viewing these. For example, a free way to pay your rent. You have to have a free way to pay. Well, what does free mean, right? Cash is free. Most people don't want to take cash. So then a cashier's check, right? There's a fee for you to go get that. So teasing out where exactly that line is something we'll work through the courts on that. And then also just application fees and, no fees for minors in the home. We had a report from one of our partners, Nevadans for the Common Good, that they had some of their members who were being charged a fee for everyone in the home, including children under 18. You're not doing a background check on a child. So it banned that fee. Transparency for portal fees. So if you're having a third-party app where you do payment, you have to disclose in the lease what the fee is, and you can't use that as a way to generate money. So if the portal charges you as a landlord $10 to use it, that's what you charge the tenant. You don't charge $20. It's a convenience for you as well as it is for the tenant. AB 201, it was vetoed legislation from last session, and it was about sealing eviction records. So right now, in NRS 40.2545, we have the ability to seal eviction records. And what we sought in AB 201 is to create an ultimate sealing date. So at what point should an eviction record not count for somebody? So a date where if it's 3 years, if it's 2 years, where that eviction should be sealed. So right now, how it works is if the landlord does not prevail, the record is sealed. So that could be through a dismissal, it could be through a denial, it could be when a tenant files that tenant affidavit, which if you know summary eviction, which I hope everyone does now, the tenant files first, right? So the tenant files the first pleading and then the complaint comes later. If the tenant files that tenant answer and the landlord never files the complaint, that could be because the issue was resolved. The fact that there is a record created shouldn't be held against a tenant in the future because the tenant wasn't evicted, right? The landlord did not prevail. So those are automatically sealed. And then it can be sealed by written stipulation. So landlord and tenant get together. I don't think we ever see these and it's sealed that way. Or it can be sealed by motion. In the motion, the court is weighing whether the tenant's interest in having it sealed outweighs the public's interest in knowing the information. And the statute lists a few factors in there. For example, was the eviction because of circumstances outside of the tenant's control? Were there extenuating circumstances other than that? And how long has elapsed? The issue with this is that's not an exhaustive list. So those are just some things that the court can look at. And often we're getting a denial that is a checkbox. So the tenant is not aware of why they were denied. So they don't have an idea of maybe I should reapply in 6 months. It wasn't long enough for this judge. And so I think it's important to have some more parameters there and also have the tenant get an idea of why they were denied that sealing. And then I think it's important to have an ultimate day when that eviction is sealed from public view. And I think we can get there with the stakeholders on this bill. I think the AB 201 from last session may have had things that were too uncomfortable for all the stakeholders. I think that it is reasonable to think that there is a time where an eviction should no longer be viewed by the public automatically. And I think it also is without a doubt important that a tenant know why the eviction's denied. We don't need an exhaustive, like a judge doesn't have to write a one-page order. We need one sentence. Hasn't been enough time. You know, I looked at the factors. Time was the biggest thing for me. Tenants need to know that. It also saves judicial resources because then you don't have a tenant refiling in like a month because they weren't sure why they were denied. AB 223, this is habitability reforms. I think this bill, you know, habitability, so this can be a couple things. One, it can be things like essential services, air conditioning is the classic one. You know, it's 100 and whatever 6 degrees. I was really happy to wear a suit today. You know, what happens when your air conditioner goes out? So essential services, and then things that aren't essential, right? It impacts your enjoyment of your home, but it's not something that you cannot live without, like air conditioning in the summer. So those are kind of our two different paths. In last session, we had a bill that was designed to give tenants access to the court. So right now, a tenant has to hazard an eviction to really have access to the courts on habitability. So a tenant needs to give notice to the landlord for repair and then withhold rent. And there's different mechanisms. We don't need to go into the weeds for if it's essential services or escrowing with the court if it's not an essential service for how you do that. The important thing is you have to risk an eviction to raise your habitability claim with the courts. And fundamentally, you know, one, tenants can't navigate that on their own. So if they don't get to a legal aid attorney, which in the state of Nevada, we have like 10 attorneys who are doing landlord tenant. You know, we're going to have 60,000 evictions this year. We have 10 attorneys doing that work. So if you don't get to an attorney, you're not going to effectively raise habitability. So then, you know, we just don't have access to recourse. And then when you do meet with an attorney, they have to tell you, you have to hazard an eviction. You have to withhold your rent. And then they say, well, will I get that rental money back if I've been without an AC for a month? Maybe, probably not is the answer. That's the reality on the ground. So how I want to frame habitability is what do we think? Like, let's not talk about what the law is or the bill that was brought last session, but what do we think should happen objectively if I'm renting an apartment and my AC goes out tomorrow? It's 106 degrees. Like, what do we think is fair for a tenant to do? And I think that's how the framing needs to be versus talking about, is this a good landlord, a bad landlord? Is this a good tenant, a bad tenant? Is what is the rational expectation? Like, I feel like most people don't even know what habitability means, but they do understand, like, if my AC goes out, I think it should be fixed, and I think it should be fixed very quickly. And then getting into questions like, does it matter if, at my home, we have an air conditioning company that they come service our AC in the spring and the fall. Is there a different expectation for a landlord who is properly maintaining their air conditioning versus a landlord who is past, you know, an air conditioner is supposed to last for 15 years? They're limping along at 22, trying to stretch that. Is there a different expectation for landlords who aren't properly maintaining their professional obligations? And so I think that's how we have to frame habitability going into next session, and understanding that our law does not work now. People don't have access to the courts. If they don't get a legal aid attorney, they're not going to be able to effectively advocate for a habitable dwelling. And then summary eviction, I should have started with this because it's the most foundational thing. And that is, and I will say the reason this bill was vetoed, and it's been vetoed twice, it was onerous obligations on landlords. I think what we have to ask is, you know, what does that mean, onerous? Because we're the only state that does it this way, right? No other jurisdiction in the country has this. And I'm not trying to like California, my Nevada, I'm trying to Mississippi it. You know, I'm trying to Oklahoma it. No other jurisdiction in the country has the tenant filing the first thing in the court. If you have any attorney, if you know any attorney who works in another jurisdiction has never been here, ask them about our process. They will look at you and tell you you are wrong. That cannot be the process. They will look at you and tell you you are wrong, and then they will look it up and they will learn that you are right. So it is a fundamental, to say that it's onerous is only to say that landlords have had their way with this statute since it was written. It is tantamountly unfair. And let's go back to habitability. Imagine if I proposed a bill that said, for habitability, tenant gives notice to the landlord. If the landlord does not fix the issue within 7 days, they have to file with the court showing what they did. And if they don't file with the court showing that they remedied the issue, then they lose. You guys would look at me like I'm crazy, but that's exactly how the tenants have it when it comes to eviction. And so the idea that it creates an onerous burden, I think is just false. And I think everybody should look at it objectively, not through, any type of partisan lens, but just like basic fairness, because summary evictions are just not fair in our state. And it says something. We were the only state doing it. And it's not in a good way, like Nevada's unique and awesome. We have, like Las Vegas is different, right? It's in a terrible way. And so reforms for next session. I think we're going to need continued support for expansion of eviction diversion. I think it's a model that works. Folks who are being, and I know rents have cooled by like 1%. That doesn't help a senior who was barely scraping by before COVID. And so these programs that are keeping the most vulnerable housed are going to continue to be very important. Monitoring tenant fee transparency and making sure that that's working as it was intended. I don't have any flags for that or any cleanup right now that I think are needed, that I think would be needed. Eviction record sealing, and one way to look at eviction record sealing that might make sense is, we have Campus for Hope being built right now. Campus for Hope is transitional housing, and they're using the federal definition of transitional housing, which means up to 24 months. So what are you going to do with a tenant who was evicted, fell into homelessness, got to Campus for Hope? They've done 24 months, they've changed their life, and they're going to try to get housing. Maybe that 24 months is a good amount of time to say, okay, at 24 months, we're sealing these records, because that's how we define transitional housing, and that's when people are going to need a new opportunity. And then habitability enforcement. I think building on what the average person, if you said, what should happen if your AC breaks today? What do you expect to happen? What would you expect your landlord if you've never read your lease? And trust me, no one reads their leases. Only attorneys read leases. And the last time I signed a lease, I didn't read it. That no one reads a lease. The only time I read a lease is when somebody sends it to me and says, John, something unfair is happening. And I'm like, all right, let me dig in. And then finally, summary eviction. This should be as vanilla of a bill as the legislature sees, because it is unfair from the jump. And I think it's just important to recognize it is basic. It's hard to build any other protections when you have such a backward system. And then this is just like, kind of recapping what I just said. You can, read those. We don't want to be a unique state when it comes to tenant protections. We want to be in line with the rest of the country. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much for today and your presentation and all the information you provided. We'll start with Vice Chair Pazina.
Thank you so much, Chair. And thank you so much, Mr. Norman, for being here today. I always enjoy seeing you, and I really enjoyed the presentation. I knew this was coming, so I actually did have a question I wanted to ask in regards to enforcement of AB 21. I had a constituent reach out to me very recently, and I knew I was going to see you in regards to the fee-free rental payments. They have a new management company, and that is no longer happening. And I was wondering what you would recommend if I could get them in touch with legal aid, or what would be the best avenue for them?
Yeah, that's a great question, Senator Brazina, Jonathan Norman, for the record. So all our legislators and elected officials, you should have my cell phone. It's on my business cards. Just text me their name and number and say, John, and where they live. Because, it depends which legal aid we go to. But that's something we need to review and then and do an intake. And they may not income qualify for us because we are, we help folks who are in poverty, but we can at least point them in the right direction and give them legal information as to, no, your company cannot do this, right? And potentially point them to pro bono attorneys, depending on like the exact facts of their case, or we can take it in-house if there's somebody who is within our income guidelines. But everyone, no matter where you're at in the state, I got a call from somebody in Jackpot who was having a landlord-tenant issue. I'm taking that call and we're going to try to help them. We don't have an attorney out there, right? So we're giving them legal information. So definitely just shoot me a text, send me an email.
Committee members, any additional questions? I don't see any. Sorry, Senator Steinbeck. Well, before you get started, I do agree with you that our eviction process is backwards, and just so that you're aware, I will be bringing that bill back next session myself. Senator.
Wonderful, Jonathan Norman, for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation too. I wanted to know a little bit more about the diversion process and what relief is given. Is it like one time to get them back up to their rent caught up? Is it ongoing for multiple times? Do they have to reapply each time or go through the process each time? Can you just kind of expand on that?
Jonathan Norman, for the record. Thank you, Senator. So each jurisdiction does things differently, but in Clark County, and I don't want to say the exact number, but it is one time. So how the process works is you check, on your answer, I am 63 years old, or I have an adult with a disability living in my home. And that puts you in the diversion queue. And then social services is reaching out to you. You have to provide them a bunch of documents to show that your income and that you actually have, you are what you, sometimes people don't check the right thing, that you are 63 or whatever the qualifying thing is. And then it is one time. And so, and I just can't remember, and I don't want to misspeak, if it's 2 months prospectively, the month and the month you're behind. But we do have a number. And the idea behind eviction diversion is that you're looking at sustainability of housing. So we're not, one, paying forever, because that doesn't work. Our system can't support just paying for people to live in a house forever. And then two, the idea is we're looking at the whole person, and is this unit sustainable for you? So if your income isn't changing, then we need to switch as social services and focus on rehousing. We need to find you an option that is better for you, because even if we pay, and I can get you the exact parameters if it's 2 months back, current month, and 2 months forward, but it is one time and it's not ongoing. And the idea is that we're going to get you in a stable house that you can afford. And that could be there because you could have had just something that knocked you off course, a medical bill you weren't expecting, your car broke down or something.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Any additional questions? I don't see any. Thank you for being with us today.
All right, thank you so much. Have a great day.
We will now go to our last presentation today. With us, we have On the Housing Group. Welcome. You may begin when you're ready.
Thank you very much. And I know that it's the last agenda item of the day, so let's breeze right through this. For a person that knows from sitting where you are, we want to get through this expeditiously as possible. So good morning, Chairwoman Marzola, and it is still bon dia.
Bon dia.
And members of the committee, thank you for having me. I'm Cedric Creer. I'm the Vice President of Government Relations for On the Housing Group, and I very much appreciate your opportunity to present to you this morning. First, let me thank you for your service to our great state. As a former elected official, myself, 12 years as a regent for INCHI, 2 years as a Las Vegas Planning Commissioner, 6 years as a Las Vegas City Councilman and former president of the Nevada League of Cities. I know many times that the hard work that you put in, the commitments that you make, the sacrifices that you commit to this state many times go overlooked and unthanked. So Thank you very, very much for your time. I'm not sure if you saw this morning in the Reno Gazette Journal, it ties into very appropriately what I'm talking about today, is the front page lead story says tough market. And it says that the Reno's rent costs set another record, straining tenants as vacancy rates stay low. And so it ties into what we do and what I do now as the Vice President of Government Relations for Onda Housing Group. Onda is a leader in the affordable housing industry focused on delivering high quality, long-term housing solutions for working individuals and families across the country. We are based in Naples, Florida, and also here in Las Vegas. We're co-founded by our CEO, Andrew Cribbs, who has developed over 20,000 units of affordable housing throughout his career. Andrew sends his regards as he wanted to be here today, but unfortunately he was unable to attend. We've been very busy for the past 3.5 years. We have over 2,800 units of multifamily affordable housing under development in Southwest Florida, which corresponds to $943 million in our development pipeline of investments. In addition, we are actively working to bring quality affordable units into Southern Nevada with intentions to move our way throughout the state as well as throughout the country. We are targeting to develop over 20,000 units over the next decade. So what sets us apart? First is our long-term commitment to our developments. As you may know, the average syndication period for an affordable housing project is 30 years. And once that period expires, the developer can either re-syndicate the project for additional years, sell the property, or turn it into a market rate development, which would then cause rents to escalate to what the current market rates are, forcing renters to either pay a higher rent, or in many cases, forcing them to seek additional affordable places to live, or in some cases are evicted and they are out on the street. We just heard that they're looking at 60,000 evictions in the state of Nevada this year. That is mind-blowing. Our developments for Onda, all of our developments are 100% affordable units and featuring 1, 2, 3, and some 4 bedrooms for families and have an affordability period of 99 years, which ensures that the low rents will be there for the lifespan of the building. We don't take large development fees off the top like most developers. We invest those dollars back into the project, helping us create beautiful developments that include clubhouses, pools, barbecue pits, and more. Also, our developments provide safe, resilient, and attainable housing for residents at or below 60% of the area median income, or AMI, which according to HUD's 2025 maximum income limits in Clark County, a household size of 4, you cannot make more than $56,940 a year at 60% AMI. In the state of Nevada, the AMI is $78,260. Although there are many reasons people enter homelessness, one main factor, as we know, is the lack of affordable housing. Good, hardworking, and educated professionals just cannot afford to find a place to live and raise their families. And I know you know this, but these are teachers, these are officers, these are firefighters, these are cocktail servers, bartenders, front desk agents, guest room attendants, valet parkers, and so many others who are struggling and working hard every day just to make rent. One major aspect of my job is advocate for sound policy at the federal, state, and local levels. I spent a lot of time in DC, throughout Florida and Nevada, speaking with lawmakers, promoting the importance of supporting the development of more affordable housing. Onda is a member of the Nevada Housing Coalition. I serve on the policy committee. And our CEO, Andrew, is a board member of the Affordable Housing Tax Credit Coalition. And why that's important is that the AHTCC is the oldest advocacy group to support the Low Income Housing Tax Credit Program, aka LIHTC, which is the #1 avenue the federal government has been used to support affordable housing since the mid-'80s. So what we know across the country is that the numbers are staggering. The National Low Income Housing Coalition reports that there is roughly a shortage of 7.2 million affordable rental homes for extremely low income families, spending more than 50% of their monthly income on rent. Only 16 affordable rental homes are available for every 100 extremely low households. According to the Pew Research Center, nearly 50% of all renting households are considered cost burden, which means you're spending more than 30% of their income on rent and utilities. In Nevada, as you know, the Gwen Center's 2025 Housing Affordability in Nevada report quotes, between 2010 and 2023, median gross rent increased by 70.4%, while median monthly household income increased by 58.8%, and more than 58% of all renters in Nevada are cost burdened. Thousands of affordable housing units are needed throughout the state just to make a dent in the overall need. We applaud Governor Lombardo and members of the 2025 legislature for working to bring AB 540 to reality. In addition, we would also like to thank the Nevada Housing Division, Administrator Steve Acroft, Chief Financial Officer Christine Hess, who have been amazing and exceptional to work with. So AB 540 is a wonderful beginning in appropriating the revolving $133 million into the Nevada Attainable Housing Account, which is meant to support the expansion of affordable housing by investing in developers, homeownership, and local governments matching their funds. And although it's too soon to properly evaluate its effectiveness, we look to work with the governor, upcoming legislators, and the affordable housing community to build upon your work. I would like to present to you one thought, though, and a potential piece of legislation you may consider. As I mentioned, we currently have over 2,800 units of multifamily affordable rentals under development in Florida. In 2023, the Florida State Legislature passed what's called the Live Local Act, which is Senate Bill 102. The bill is under its third iteration, as it has been updated each year in subsequent sessions. And the intent of the Live Local Act is very simple: to encourage the development of affordable housing in the state of Florida. The act allows approval of affordable multifamily and mixed-use residential developments. The state law preempts local planning and zoning and requires local governments to administratively approve projects that designates at least 40% of the units as affordable and provides incentives to developers such as tax exemptions, increased density, and reduced parking requirements, and zoning certainty in commercial, industrial, and mixed-use areas, as well as in areas such as planned unit developments. In the 2025 Florida legislative session, they also updated the act to include housing projects on land owned by religious institutions. The Live Local Act also includes the funding and tax credits of up to $111 million for affordable housing programs. And this has made a significant impact in the development of affordable housing, especially in multifamily. According to the Live Local Act mapping dashboard, since inception, there have been over 200 proposed projects and roughly 7,400 units under construction. The program has helped over 1,600 families buy their first home with $27 million in down payment assistance. And ONDA has several projects which qualifies under the Live Local Act. And although we can bypass neighborhood meetings, we can receive administrative approvals on our projects, we still have held what they call NIMs, neighborhood information meetings, and work with local governments to build the best projects that works for most. And so having similar state law in place here in Nevada would make an immediate impact in the development of more affordable housing. And even though I served in local government, I believe having tools associated by bypassing home rule locally, streamlining the entitlement process, providing certainty in land zoning and density approvals, while shortening development times will in turn get more units completed, get them to market faster, and start serving our communities. It is really in the best interest of us all. So as you can see, there's much work to be done. And ONDA Housing Group is committed to working alongside you and finding ways to develop sound policy that will address the statewide issue of the lack of affordable housing. We look to become your most trusted partner and know that when we say we're going to do it, we are going to do it. In addition, we know that in building affordable housing, every dollar we can save will ultimately be saved by our residents and taxpayers. So let's work together to become the state that is doing it right. And that is not just talking about bringing more affordable housing into our communities, but the state who is bringing more affordable housing into our communities. And so I thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your commitment to making Nevada a better place. And if you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them to the best of my ability. Be nice.
Thank you for your presentation today and waiting to be the last presenter. Before I pass it to questions, I just have a quick question. So on your sheet, it states 2,805 units currently under development.
Yes.
Is that Florida?
That is all in Florida.
Okay.
Yeah. So in Southwest Florida, to be even more specific, North Fort Myers, we have a 30-acre parcel we're developing in Naples, 600 some odd units for seniors and also for multifamily. And so, yeah, in there, we're also going into Palm Beach, and we're looking to go throughout the state.
My question is, how many do you have here in Nevada?
We do not have any in Nevada quite yet. Yeah, we are working on it, and we have some options in play right now for some parcels that we're looking at. And as I mentioned, we're looking at Southern Nevada first, but we're also looking in Northern Nevada and looking to go throughout the entire state of Nevada.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. Question? Assemblymember Miller.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you for your presentation. I would just like a few questions. So we know that you're looking for land here to build in Nevada, and I have to be very honest with this. I know that a facility is opening on the west side. It's a nice facility. It's beautiful. I saw it on the news. And then when they said the price, I almost choked because that is not low income affordability at all. And when you discuss that, like for instance, a family of four at a maximum of 56,000, it's difficult for a single person to live on 56,000 right now. So could you give me an example? And I know it may be different pricing in Florida than it would be here in Nevada, but when we're looking at what these apartments, because we get all the time people saying affordable housing, could you just tell us how much would it be, say for instance, for certain units? What should a person expect to pay each month? Again, looking at, you use the idea of a family of four, maximum 56,000. What would their rent if we did have these facilities in Nevada be?
Yeah, so that project, which when I was a councilman, brought that into the historic West Side, at Share West Side, there's a groundbreaking today at 3 o'clock, 104 units of workforce housing. We average about 60% of AMI. I don't know specifically what that particular project is in terms of affordability. We go from 30% of area median income up to 60% of area median income. We have not gone over that. And if you followed what took place, there's a conversation about affordable housing and the difference between attainable housing. And I also heard today that the units, I watched the news this morning, the units were attainable housing. So I'm thinking that they're probably over 60%. And the legislature for AB 540 talked about 100% of AMI, 150% of AMI, 120% of AMI, which in essence can be considered to be normal rate in some instances. The project that we were looking at, which is on the verge of Ward 5, the rate that is established based off of the area median income is about $1,700 a month for a 2-bedrooms. We were looking to go in about $1,200 a month as an example, which in essence is still high, right? Look, I've got a daughter who's 26 who's looking to buy right now or rent. Other daughter just graduated and our house is full. Needless to say, there's no closet space. It's only women. And so we're trying to figure out how to and what to do. And we are actively going out looking at homes, looking at rentals, and it is expensive. What I can say is this, is that we need more units in the 30% to 60% range. We need more developers to come into our community to develop. We need more people who are willing to go in and build quality units with the amenities that our residents want and need, and then keep it at a rate that is going to be affordable, quote affordable, for a very long period of time.
Thank you.
Vice Chair.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you so much for the presentation. I really enjoyed it, and obviously affordable housing is so important, and I think coming out of the pandemic, it's something we heard quite a bit, especially from those on fixed incomes. I saw in that sheet, and thank you for sharing that with us, that 20,000 units are targeted for development over the next decade, and I'm guessing that's nationwide. But I was curious in Nevada specifically if there was an estimate yet, or if there had been any discussions over the next decade of maybe how many units were targeted here in Nevada specifically.
We do not have a number that is specific. I will say this, is that when the opportunity presents itself, we move forward with it, right? And there are a number of aspects of just raw land that is available that is limited, obviously, and we've been in DC supporting the release of more BLM land. And, there's a lot of BLM land that is located right in the heart of our cities. And we sort of always think that it's out in the mountains someplace in the nowhere, but there's a lot of land that is owned by the federal government that is right in our cities. And so we do support the release of more BLM land. We have actively put in bids, and we will continue to put in bids for that. We are also looking to look at projects that is called acquisition rehab. When those syndicated timeframes end, 15 years, sometimes 30 years, then as I mentioned, those units can either go back to be market rate, they can go back to be re-syndicated to keep it affordable for another 15, 30 years, or they can go and people would have to get evicted or they would leave to go find other places. And so we're looking to expand to not only look at raw land, but to also look at which properties are coming out of syndication and to reevaluate those and reinvest into those. But we don't have a sound number yet. But when the opportunity comes about, believe me, we are actively looking and seeking.
Committee members, any additional questions? Looks like we have no more questions. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you guys very much. And thank you for your service. We appreciate it. Look forward to building a lot more affordable housing throughout the state of Nevada. Thank you.
Thank you. That was our last presentation for today. We will now open up for public comment. Please address your remarks to issues that fall within the jurisdiction of this committee. Do we have anyone wishing to give public comment in Las Vegas? Welcome. Please remember to state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes. You can begin when you're ready.
Thank you. My name is Taisakan Hall, TaisakanHall. Before I keep going, I do just want to say that I'm really excited to see you all in person. That makes the comment just a little bit stronger. I'm a lived experience specialist with the Nevada Homeless Alliance, or NHA. I know that today has been very data heavy. I am going to throw just a little bit more data your way that I think brings a lot of these presentations together, especially as it pertains to tenant protections. HUD recently released their AHAR, or Annual Homelessness Assessment Report. Nevada saw a roughly 2% drop in the amount of people experiencing homelessness on a given night. So we went from 10,106 to 9,906, which is a very low percent. We also, according to the National Low Income Housing Coalition, have a very low amount of affordable housing units that are available for folks that are extremely low income. That's 16 for every 100 extremely low income tenant. So we've had one of, if not the lowest amount of inventory available for folks, with 88% of those renters that are extremely low income. We're talking like 30% area median income, or AMI, and below, that are severely cost burdened. And I'm bringing up these numbers because I work in our homeless response system. Obviously, housing and homelessness are very deeply interconnected. And I believe that all of these protections work in tandem. When rent is exacerbated, it becomes more difficult for people to obtain housing. For folks who are able to obtain their housing, it becomes increasingly difficult for them to maintain their housing because they're getting priced out, because they're not having their habitability violations properly addressed because of a number of different things that you've already heard of today. So I don't need to go through all of them. But that eviction diversion, the summary eviction reform, habitability, all of these things are pieces of legislation that make sense. They're pieces of legislation that make it easier for folks to be where they need to be and sustain themselves. And so I will leave it at that, because I'm sure that they're going to expand on that some more. But thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for being with us today. And I know you're on the ground, so thank you for everything that you're doing for the community.
Hello, my name is Noah Cicero, Noahcicero. I am here regarding housing bills. I hope to see AB 223 habitability and AB 283 summary eviction bills, and SB 10 regarding private equity homeownership to be reintroduced in the 2027 session. So I listened to the the legal aid person, and I lived in an apartment for 13 years. So when the air conditioning dies in the middle of summer, what happens is they put a desert cooler, one desert cooler in your apartment, and they stick the pipe in the window and they lift the window up a little bit, and the hot air comes through the window. A young person can do very well and survive, but elderly people obviously have a problem. And one time in an apartment, they used these really smelly chemicals that were just making us nauseous to clean the apartment over after they were evicted. And we had to leave the apartment. We called them. They're like, whatever, leave the apartment. So if there's a flood, when they bomb the apartment, you have to stick all of your stuff into plastic bags and you have to leave the apartment for 1 or 2 days. So I think it would be really cool if there was some type of rule or law that while they're having the habitability issue, they either have to let them go into an empty apartment, maybe they have like a hotel room apartment, or they have to pay for a hotel room. Because when that happens, you have nowhere to go if you have no family here. And I had luckily had family here, but some people don't. So I just wanted to kind of like fill in the details of what it's like to have the air conditioning die when it's 107. Just that one desert cooler like this big in the middle of your living room trying to fill air for the whole place. Thank you so much. And I'm really glad that I was here and I got to talk to you today.
Thank you. I'm Val Thomason. I'm the Housing Justice Organizer at PLAN. At PLAN, we've always tried to introduce the human element to policies and bring impacted people to the legislature to let you see what these policies are actually doing to people in real life. Last year during the session, we brought a group of maybe 10 people to support the habitability law. 2 of them were elderly disabled women who were experiencing mold, rats, retaliative landlords. I reached out to them in the last couple of weeks to invite them to our next legislative planning, and they are both sleeping on the streets now because they had attempted to withhold their rent and fight back against these habitability issues, and they were both evicted from their apartments. So even the people that we're bringing here, which is a very small subsect, of the people impacted by the habitability laws, they're not making it out of that. Sorry, that's it for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being with us today. Is there anyone else in Las Vegas wishing to provide public comment? Is there anyone in Carson City wishing to provide public comment? I don't see anyone walking up. Broadcast, is there anyone on the line?
Thank you, Chair. The public lines are open and working, but there are no callers for public comment at this time.
Thank you. Members, are there any comments before we adjourn? I don't see any. Thank you for being with us today as well. This meeting's adjourned.